So the big thing that I kind of want to look at now that we're in a new location, we're set up again, technical issues. The biggest thing is I find people not knowing what they want to do, right? A lot of it's a general, like, oh, try a bunch of this, where do we start? But then there's also a catch-22 where it's, I might not like it, but that might just be because I'm not good at it, right? So it's like, what's the fine line? What's the best way you think, from what you've seen work out really well in your years, as, hey, this is the best way I would go about trying different things so that you could see what would work and what sticks?
Yeah, and what sticks for now doesn't mean it needs to stick for the rest of your life,
Sure.
right? So your interests, when you're in high school, are going to be very different from your interests when you go on beyond high school to whatever it is you do next.
Mm-hmm.
And every decision you make is not a permanent decision. It's a decision that of what suits you and right now, and for you to pursue these interests at this moment. But your interests at the age of 14 are not your interests at the age of 17, are not your interests at the age of 21.
Yeah. So then is it just a matter of like whatever comes up or whatever you think about? Because that doesn't make sense. Like I didn't really ever have an interest in geopolitics or economics until I was like mid-20s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is fascinating. I want to learn about wealth management and stuff.
Yeah.
But when I was like 17, I couldn't care at all about it. So that's interesting. So when these moments of inspiration kind of come through to you, do you think it's best if they just, let's dive into that and figure that out and like see what we can make of this? Or is it just, okay, well, like, let's put that on the list for later? Like, you mentioned vision board and stuff like that. Do you kind of like keep a list of things you want to do, or is it just whenever inspiration strikes?
Yeah, glimpses are things to keep track of, and we all have glimpses of things that we want to pursue, and some of them we want to chase down in the short term, and some of them we might want to hold off on, circle back to. A prime example is I was a really good runner when I was in elementary school, and I remember running on the 400 meters for my high school. I was in grade 9 or grade 10, and I really wasn't very fast. Yeah. And some guy was watching me, and he was a marathon runner. He said, "You're not a 400 meter runner. You're a long distance runner. You're an endurance runner."
100%.
And I didn't make much of that, but I stopped running. And then when I retired from horses and I started gaining a lot of pounds, to keep up with the boxers when I was in training camps in Big Bear or in Bogota or wherever it is that I was working with the pros, I started running with them on the road, and lo and behold, I was out running the boxers. Yeah. And then I realized, this guy was right.
Oh,
and that was a glimpse. And now I'm ramping up for a marathon October 5th. I've won some halves.
This is your first one, eh?
First one.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, congratulations. Let's go.
At the age of 58, it's my first one, and I'm going to chase it down and hopefully qualify for Boston and go from there and see if I could. So that I could not just be a participant, but someone who's really the cream of the crop for my age group.
No way.
So, but I wouldn't have done that in my 20s. I wouldn't have held my interest at all. Wouldn't have done it in my teenage years. I thought running was painful. Yeah. I rode a horse. Let the horse run. Why me?
It is painful.
Yeah.
I wouldn't care. Last summer I ran the Ottawa Marathon, the 42.2 with a friend of mine, because it was his idea. Yeah. He goes, let's run a marathon. And I was like, well, because he said as a bucket list thing, he's always wanted to run one. Marathon. Right? Obviously, right? Most people like who aren't really into athletics are like, that's a cool challenge now that I've been introduced to running. And I look at him and I go, he's struggling with the idea. And I'm like, the easiest way to do it is, right? He's like, what? I'm like, just register. Register, just do it. Yeah. I think I actually said, just do it. And he was like, well, how? I'm like, register. Yeah. Step one.
Take it from there.
Yeah, really. And then that was it. And then, we went, crushed it, did well. I think we were in between like a participant and somebody challenging, like we were pushing it. His hips gave out, but I found, what's the farthest you've ran in training run so far?
Well, yesterday I ran 31K.
Gross.
In the heat. Yeah. And that was nice.
What time of day did you go?
I had to have breakfast with my wife on the deck, so I landed up. So I started later, and I was still running at 11 o'clock in the morning. Man. But I train in hot weather, so that when I get to October, it's going to be a lot easier to run 42.2, right? Yeah. But I've run 34, 35. Okay. I'm sort of in the wheelhouse of what you should be sort of finishing off with in your training before you go to a marathon. I'm there now.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. I know, we had hit our peak mileage at that time. We ran once a week, and then a couple months leading up, we would run like 2 or 3, right? Leading up. So yeah, it was pretty interesting to see. But I do remember. What's funny is I see a bunch of people running, and they all run halves, but nobody takes that step because that
was me.
Yeah,
that was me.
No way.
Totally
so here you go.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, that was me, and then I put it off, and I was sidelined for a few years.
Yeah.
And then I came back and thought, I've already done halves. Why would I want to do another half? I'm going to do a full. And then I see how I enjoy it. And my wife said, "Well, get this off your bucket list, and then we can move on." I said, "What if I like it?
Oh, no.
What if I like it?
Then
I'm going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I'm going to go down the rabbit hole.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because that's what I do is I chase rabbits.
Yeah.
And we should all be chasing rabbits. The rabbits are different at different stages in our life, but we should always be choosing to press the edge and do something new and push our curiosity. Because if we get stuck in one thing, whether it's hockey or running or doing research or working at the mine or whatever it is we're doing, and we do that for 40 or 45 years, that's a recipe for being bored and being unhappy. So you got to keep reinventing yourself constantly.
So it's almost it almost seems like there's no wrong decision to make in terms of what you.
Well, who's to say what's wrong and who's to say what's right?
Exactly.
It's what's curious right now, and it's what gives me enjoyment right now. And there's enough things you do that aren't enjoyable, so that you should have something in every day that is something that really turns your crank.
No kidding, eh?
Yeah.
Oh man, do you have a morning routine?
Do I have a morning routine?
Yeah, like a structured one, or?
Yeah, I have a cup of coffee.
I get my ass to work.
I get out of bed, I have a cup of coffee on the deck, and I look over my domain. No, I don't have a morning routine. It varies. Some days I run in the morning. Some days I run in the afternoon. I've got work to do, different sorts of engagements around my work at Laurentian. But no, it's variable from day to day.
Did you have to do? How'd you get? At what stage in your life did you get hired on at Laurentian?
I got hired on shortly after my PhD, and I was working full time at the Bell Center in Montreal, working with professional boxers, and we had just inked our first 2 world champions at the same time.
Oh,
and it was fantastic, and I was traveling all over to Romania and Germany and to the US and all these other places. And I figured I needed a stable income. So I didn't want to give that up, and I never did give it up.
No.
But I did a full-time professorship and the research and the graduate studies and helping mentor kids out of high school and into university in the sports psych program. But then I always kept working with Olympic and professional sport.
Oh, amazing. So do you, in that time, have a athlete that you worked with or a coach that you worked alongside or a mentor that you can recall that stood out to you?
First one that really stood out to me, there were 2 that profoundly stood out to me in my early days. One of them was a veteran boxer, and he had tried several world title fights without the use of sports psychology, and he had flunked out miserably. Like he had been knocked out several times, and he was coming to the end of his career, and I was brought into by a management group to work with all these boxers in the stable, and he was one of them. And he said to me, I've got nothing to lose. I don't believe in what you do. The only condition is you got to learn to speak French. So I had to learn in a very short order. I spoke some pidgin French, but I didn't really speak French. And he was from the interior of Quebec, and he spoke Quebecois French.
Oof,
and we struck up a pretty good relationship, and 6 months later he was a world champion. So that was one really cool dude. And he was such a great human being. The other one was a kid who walked up to me when I was working with the Olympic team at the same time for boxing, and he walked up to me, wanted to shake my hand. He was 14 or 15. He said, "You don't know me yet, but you're going to know me." He said, "You're going to be seeing me soon on the national team." He said, "And then after that, you'll be seeing me in the pros." He said, "And I'll be working with you."
Amazing.
I like you. And that person landed up going to the Olympics and then being a unified world titleist in boxing. And had this illustrious career on HBO. But he had this brazen attitude at the age of, he was in grade 8 or grade 9. And he said, "You don't know me yet." He said, "But you're going to know me soon. And this is my name, and you'll be seeing me. Just remember this face. Remember this mug." And those were his opening words to me.
That's
and then
amazing.
a few years later, he was a sparring partner for a national team training camp up in Isilda.
Jeez.
And he said, "You remember me?" I said, "Yeah, I remember you." He said, "Yeah, now I'm on the junior team, and I just given a workshop to all the boxers, and everyone else left, and he stayed. He said, "I'm going to be working with you from here on in for the rest of my career."
Oh, he just knew.
25 years of working together we've done.
No way.
Yeah, and but he always had this intense eye contact. Like he wanted you to look into his eyes, and he wanted to tell you.
Yeah.
In case you didn't know it, he was going to be great.
He was in your soul.
Yeah.
With a look.
Yeah.
Jeez.
It's such immense belief in what he does.
No
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, it was quite something. So those were two examples of really neat people.
Yeah, no kidding. I wonder what that stemmed from. Like where, like, so I guess in some cases you just have it, right?
Yeah,
Man,
had it from the from the get go.
Just knew,
and just knew, believed, and people didn't believe in him, but people became believers. But he was one of the first people to talk to me about naysayers, and people who didn't believe in you, and they don't know anything about you, and how could they tell you that you're going to make it or not make it? They're not you.
Right. He's like, they don't know.
Yeah, you just go.
Yeah.
You know, they're just spitballing.
The biggest thing, like, kind of piece of advice or thing I kind of learned that was through the last little bit of doing the show was there's this, like, I don't know if it was a Japanese thing or the woman was, but whatever it was that came across my desk was it really kind of made me relax when she was referring to her parents kind of guiding her in a certain direction, whether she wanted to or not. And the thing that is related to this as well, and why I find it funny that a lot of people say, no, you can't do this. It's like, well, you don't know, but also I don't know if I can do it either. But I'm telling you I'm going to. Yeah. So then when it does happen, there's like, wait a minute. It's like nobody actually really knows. We're all kind of taking our first crack at this life thing, right? So it's like, oh, well, what's working? Okay, well, doing what you want to do anyway and persevering. Okay, that's weird. Everybody who does that seems to be successful. Right, like there are those common traits, right, that I think everybody has, but some of us are kind of misguided.
But here's the deal, and Laura Young said it in the Sudbury Star not long ago, a couple of days ago, is that the best athletes have to be the athletes who are prepared to give other people the proverbial finger.
Yeah.
And say, I'm doing it, you don't know what you're talking about, bucker off.
Yeah.
I'm doing me.
Oh man, do you think that you need, like, there is some form of being selfish in order to get to that level? Selfish?
No. We're all doing what we want to do, and when we're not doing what we want to do, we become miserable with ourselves and with the people around us.
Right.
And those are the people who are the naysayers. They're the people who are not happy with their own decisions, and so why would they give you props for wanting to chase down your rabbits?
Yeah.
So they're never going to give you those props. And most people are not on the authentic path that they wanted to be on.
Right.
And they got pulled away, and they allowed themselves to be pulled away. And the thing about the people who make it is they don't allow themselves to deviate. They do not, and if they deviate, it's not for long, and they pull themselves back really quickly and say, I don't know where my head was.
Yeah. So, if I'm wondering then, I know of some athletes that they win, so say they win like a national title, and then in their head when they win, they're not competitive about it, like they won because they're like the guy who's stronger than them didn't show up, or the guy who's faster than them didn't show up. But then the next year they don't win, or they come second to the and then they're just always like chasing that podium, but they're not quite, and they need like that flip switch over.
Yeah.
What's the guidance for people in that sticky situation where they're at that level?
It's a common thing that goes on. It's common occurrence. Is what you're describing is a person who's chasing a result and not a person who's chasing a performance.
It seems like
the people who are the very best in whatever it is they do, it doesn't matter whether it's business, sport, coaching, research, anything that they do. The really top of the top are not comparing themselves with anyone else. They're chasing an extraordinary level of excellence that other people are not considering, because the other people are considering where they stand in relation to the people around them. Why would I ever consider, like when I was in research, why would I ever consider what someone else is doing to measure my success? No, I chose my own path, and I forged my own path and my own standards, and they're very different from the common person in my field, and I don't care whether people like it or not. That is my path, and it was my process, and I liked it because I made all the decisions. I was a pilot in my own life.
Wow. So it seems to me then, with looking at those little bits and difference, and I understand it's result driven and what have you. Is it a matter then at that point, Robert, setting a goal that's even greater than the result of that? And it's like, hey, I'm going to be this is like achieve that excellence of excellence. And even if you don't quite get that, well, you still like almost falls to the original goal? Like, how does that? I'm just trying to understand that dynamics
People,
and how they.
it's hard to know because goals keep changing.
Right, it's
As you
individual
move
based.
along, you go further and further in terms of what really is possible for me. You look at a guy like Connor Bedard this year, who's a really interesting first-year hockey player for them.
Insane, yeah.
And insane. But if you watch the way he plays with the puck, that was something he did as a kid. If you watch and you listen to stories about Wayne Gretzky and what he did in his backyard, and it was just curiosity, enjoyment. It wasn't necessarily to make the NHL. He just loved what he did.
Right.
You know, and that's a commonality across all fields. The people who do things at the extraordinary, I'm not talking about world class. I'm not even talking about the cutting edge. I'm talking about the tip of the spear, right? Those people at the apex of the apex, thin edge of the wedge, those people are doing their own thing, and they're doing it out of pure pleasure, curiosity, creativity, carving new ways to do it, forging new boundaries. And they're the ones who are the world beaters. They're the ones who are not like everyone else because they didn't take everyone else's pathway. They took something that was process oriented, and they did not focus on where they fit in the podium or whether they were going to get drafted or whether they were going to make the cut for this Olympic Games or not. They weren't driven by those outcomes. The outcomes came to them as a consequence of the excellence that they have.
Right.
Not the other way around. You don't.
It was
you
a
don't,
byproduct. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a byproduct of a good pathway instead of focusing the pathway on getting the result.
Right.
And that's where a lot of high-end athletes fall off the band.
Being goal driven.
There are extraordinary athletes who are not making the cut in their respective sports because they are driven by results, and that's been reinforced by coaches and reinforced by the media and reinforced by the public and reinforced in themselves, and so they're always measuring, and they can't control someone else's performance, but they can control their own. And if you focus exclusively on yours, it's like putting blinders on a horse. They don't see right and they don't see left, they see in front of them, and then they take that path.
Oh, jeez. I have heard of that. I'm like,
yeah.
They run, they can only see forward. They can't
That's
see
right.
side.
That's why standardbreds have blinders on them.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, but that's why people should, to a degree, you compare yourself to a degree, but that comes naturally. You're going to know where you stand with other people, but that doesn't mean it's always fixed. You may not, like early on in my career with equestrian, I didn't place well.
Right.
I also didn't give a, you know, I didn't honestly care. I knew that the time was coming. The time was coming, and I toyed with it, and people told me I wasn't a researcher. I thought the time was coming, I toyed with it.
Oh, geez.
And I was a leader, and time was coming, and I toyed with it, and then I got there. And now I'm looking at, okay, what do I want to do next? What is possible in Academy of Science? No, that's done. What it really is the next thing to conquer to keep me engaged and keep me excited about waking up in the morning so that I'm not going into an early retirement, sitting back in a Berkeley lounger and doing absolutely nothing with my life. I never will. It's not in it's not in my repertoire to sit back and retire and watch other people thrive and then be passive in life.
100%.
You got to meet life head on. Go to expeditions to South America. You got to do these crazy things. I was in Thailand last month. I was going in the interior of Thailand. Loved that. I like pushing every single boundary that you push. You never feel more alive than when you're pushing a boundary.
No kidding.
When you're pushing a boundary, you're not looking to the right and to the left of you. You're looking ahead.
It's crazy you say that because in the past, there's been opportunities that have crossed my desk that I've been very, very, not scared, but like nervous about, right? The ones that drove the most fear, most anxiety around or stress around, when I did do them afterwards, never felt more fulfilled.
Yeah.
In terms of like doing these opportunities. And
because you're expanding your geography.
It's crazy.
Yeah,
like,
and that's what life is supposed to be like. You're not supposed to know in high school what you're going to do after you finish trade school or college or university or whatever it is you're apprenticing in. You're not supposed to know that, but you should constantly be thinking, okay, what's next? What's around the corner?
Right.
And constantly not just be satisfied with where you're at. You can be satisfied and recognize that where you're at is good, but where you're at is good may not feel good in 10 years
no, you're
or
right.
5 years or 3 years.
Yeah.
You got to keep pushing those boundaries, and then you will thrive.
Man, why were you in Thailand recently?
I was at keynoting in Thailand in Bangkok at an international sports psych congress. I got another one in China, in mainland China in October, and another one in Hong Kong in December. Do a lot of those sorts of keynotes internationally.
It's cool that that's an industry that you're in, that you're able to, in the industry, you're able to also travel internationally. You're not just stuck in one spot.
Yeah.
Which I think is really cool. Like box
Yeah,
to
no,
check.
But I bring it back to my students, and we
Yeah,
talk
every
about
time.
these things, and we talk about what's possible for them. It's not just about my experience for my sake.
No.
It's about showing my students that there's a whole world out there of possibilities, and you don't need to be a stodgy academic or a research scientist and spend all of your time in a classroom. You should be thinking well beyond that.
Yeah.
You should be thinking well beyond the Olympics. You should be thinking well beyond professional sport. You should be thinking well beyond the corporate sector. You should be thinking about writing mainstream books. You should be thinking about adventures to far uncharted areas. You should be thinking about all of the amazing things that a life allows you to
Yeah.
do that people squander.
It's crazy, man. You talk with you talk with so much enthusiasm
Yeah.
in what you're doing and what
I
you've
love
done.
what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's incredible because a lot of people I know, I don't mean this in a negative way, your age, obviously, right? Or else you wouldn't have so much enthusiasm.
Well, I keep giving the proverbial finger to people. I keep doing
Yeah.
what I want to do and pushing the boundaries. It's in my
It's
DNA.
incredible,
In my
yeah.
DNA to do that, and that's what I teach my athletes and my students to do. Don't get stuck with someone else's judgment.
Amazing. It's a very easier said than done, but it is also, and I think too, to your point a while ago, yeah.
It might be easier said than done, but it's easier than the outcome of doing the opposite. Where you're in the trenches and bored and
Yeah.
unhappy. What a consequence. What a squandering of your
I
potential
see you.
and the curiosity.
Yeah.
You can't, it may be hard, but it's much harder to do the status quo
Yeah.
because you're going to pay for it. It may feel cozy now, but it's going to feel deadly boring in 5 years, and it's going to feel miserable in 15,
Yeah.
and it's going to feel untenable in 25, and
Yeah.
it's going to be, you're going to want to practically show yourself to the end of your life in 35
Yeah.
if you're doing the same thing and there's nothing new to discover and there's no new ideas and no new possibilities.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting quote when my buddy and I were traveling through all throughout Europe in I think it was 2018. We did this 6-week road trip, man. It was crazy. I think we slept maybe a total of 18 hours in 6 weeks. It was just ridiculous, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
We're going through, and this quote that kept coming up of all of them that my friend and I talk about because he's really into philosophy and psychology, and I think he minored in it as well. But he at Laurentian, funny enough, and he goes, it's a lot of most people die at 25, but our men, I think specifically, was most men die at 25 but aren't buried until 85 or something, right?
That's right.
Which goes to the point you're saying.
That's right.
It's absolutely insane. So to hear you talk with the enthusiasm of somebody much older than me, and then seeing a lot of people I know that's like that are maybe much younger and
Consider
don't have the
this.
enthusiasm. It's crazy.
What sport movies do we all run to in the box office? The stories about the underdogs
Yeah.
who dare to
Every
defy.
single one.
Mark Wahlberg did a movie with football.
Yeah.
I think it was called Indestructible or Invincible.
Yeah,
With
yeah.
Disney. There was another one called The Underdog with a quarterback footballer.
Mm-hmm.
And Dennis Quaid was in that one.
That's a lot.
And those are people who came to it late and by all means should not have done that. And they press reset on their lives.
Every Rocky movie.
And well, yeah, and everyone goes to Cinderella Man. All of those
Yeah.
stories are stories that appeal to us because they pull at our heartstring. Why? Because they're what we should be doing,
Yeah.
what we dare not do, and what we refuse to do.
Jeez, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that that's something that you've been able to kind of understand and realize. But you mentioned this, but you've said that that's at the it's being ingrained in you, right? Do you have any maybe feedback for parents that you think would be a good takeaway that they would maybe be able to apply so that, hey, my kids, I want them to be able to have this long-term longevity in terms of enthusiasm and stuff like that for what they're doing every day?
Yeah, those parents are up
Yeah.
against the 8 ball because a lot of them
Yeah.
might have chosen, unbeknownst to them, conventional pathways
Most
and
likely.
safe pathways and pathways where there's not a whole lot of travel, not a whole lot of discovery. So how can you encourage someone else to do something that you know little about?
Yeah.
Know that it would be good for them, but it's so colossally strange.
Yeah, there's no-
Bruce Springsteen talks about that. Everyone his whole family was from New Jersey, and when they started talking about New York City, it was it was a world away, and yet it was
Yeah.
an hour's drive away. New York City when you listen to him on Broadway.
Yeah.
And yet you got to get beyond those fears, and if it scares you, then it's a little bit it awakens you too.
Yeah.
Fear is fear of what? Fear of the unknown.
Right.
And it's only unknown until it's known.
No, it makes sense. It's very fascinating to me though, because every time I look at it, every time you say something similar to that, I look and I do a comparative analysis between things I want to do and kind of people that are telling me that it's not something I should do. Yeah. And I'm listening to it, or not
Don't
listening to it. Yeah.
Don't listen.
Just, okay.
Don't listen at all. Give it no airway, and take a look at the source.
Yeah.
And those people are playing it safe, and they're half asleep.
Usually,
and they're past that 25-year mark where they're stopping. Their growth is stalled.
Yeah. Okay.
And how can they encourage you
yeah.
to do something that they have not considered and gifted to themselves?
No, 100%.
You can't look at someone else. That has to come from within the person. That like my family did a little bit of international travel, but I've gone to Asia twice in a week. Like my world is completely different than the people that I came from, and I'm curious about it. My kids know about it, and they know it exists, and they see pictures, and they'll FaceTime me while I'm eating something in Taipei, and they know that there's a whole world out there that they should be looking at, and their potential market is out there for them to discover. It's not just here in Sudbury, and it's not just in Northern Ontario, and it's not just in Ontario or Canada.
No.
It's not just in North America. It's not. It's not just across the pond in Europe.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
What's tough is, I found, Robert, is that if you don't have strong-willed people, where I find a lot of the time, at least personally, I'm able to say no to the people that are like saying, I'm like, oh, I think it was COVID happened. I think it was 2019, 2020 summer.
Who are they saying no to?
Oh, they're like, this is a really bad idea. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it.
You're either saying no to yourself or no to other people, and you've got to make a hard decision sometimes.
Okay. I know. I was like,
don't say no to yourself.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Forget saying no to other people. Naysayers are always going to be the naysayers, and they've had naysayers in the generations before them.
It's easier to say no to them.
And even in universities and professors, a lot of them have not seen the world. None of them haven't worked in full-time jobs outside of the university and don't really understand that. And how could they? It's up to the student to figure out, and the high school student to figure out, okay, what's out there, and to discover that.
Right.
No matter what anyone else says, if it's not their no, it's nothing at all. You have to own your own no's and yeses.
Be able to decipher between the two.
You gotta. Everyone has the right to forge their own path.
Yeah. Man, I know I wanted to go out west with some friends. Yeah. And the people were like, no, you shouldn't do that. Everybody's like against the idea. Yeah. They're like, oh, because of this, you're gonna catch that, whatever. It's closed, and whatever, right? It was. We all went. Nobody we came in contact with, and nobody got sick. No. Nothing. Came back, had a blast. Half of them were like, oh, trip of a lifetime. And I'm like, I've been to France, so no. But I was like, yeah, this is crazy. This is cool. Did a lot of cool things. Connected with a lot of cool, interesting people. And it's like, for that reason, like, eternally grateful I didn't just, oh, yeah, you guys are right. And just like kind of quiver around it and go, yeah, okay, well, we're not going to. You can get COVID in the comfort of your own home. Yeah. Going out to the grocery store. Right. So why not get on a plane? Yeah. Explore something else. Push your boundaries. You can't play it safe in life. A safe life is not a happy life. No. Jeez, it's, without the risk, there is no reward. Yeah. Yeah. No risk, no reward. Do you have a, kind of switching gears, but do you have a favorite place you've traveled of all the places you've been? Because I know it's a lot. Yeah. Siberia is a kind of an interesting one. Siberia. I went there for a boxing tournament for Worlds, and a lot of the roads were dirt roads, and random. And every road had a wild dog that owned the road, and we would go out running. And it was the only place that I've ever seen high-level boxers, heavyweights and super heavyweights, scared about going out for a run. It was people were drinking very early into the day. Dogs were wild. Siberia. It was like the great frontier. Yeah. So that was one place. Singapore for its refinement and advancement. Thailand for its food is incredible. Yeah. China for their progressive competitiveness is incredible. Man. Yeah. Progressive competitiveness. Yeah, like they are right now economically. China is the powerhouse. Mm-hmm. They own how many economies do they own right now, and how did they get there? Very, very smart. They study and they take human resource and return with merchandise, and they sell their goods, and they buy expertise in order to have that expertise in their country. 100%. Yeah. So those are all really sort of neat places. Bogota.
going to Bogota, Colombia with a training camp, several training camps, and then going up the mountain to Boyaca, 14,000 feet above sea level, where athletes are crying and gasping for oxygen, and we're trying to get that high altitude training before we come back down for a big HBO fight. Those were all really amazing moments.
Jeez.
Yeah.
What do you think, kind of looking back on all that, was like a favorite moment of yours? You think between that time frame of all the traveling you've done, could you pick like a favorite one that you had, like a favorite experience?
being in the rainforest in Malaysia and seeing fireflies at night, being in the boat in the middle of a river filled with God knows what, and all you saw were these amazing fireflies, and that was like in the hinterlands of Malaysia.
And it's like dark,
completely dark, other
pitch
than the
black.
fireflies.
What?
And it was so amazing. I had to go back a second time. It was surreal.
Yeah.
So that was a good one.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I don't know. Siberia for first snowfall.
Yeah.
Best salmon I ever had in my life.
Really?
Was in Siberia, fresh caught. Yeah. What? In cold waters.
Is there like a river close by? Like
Yeah. It was. It's right on the border with Mongolia.
Oh, right, yeah.
And we were trying to figure out with boxers how to get there, and we finally settled on Siberian Airlines. But for a period of time, we were looking at going across the border on a horse. With the boxing team, we were looking at all these crazy possibilities. But all those experiences are wonderful experiences.
Horses.
Yeah.
Couldn't fly.
Yeah, the Rio Olympics. That was a cool one. Like Tokyo was nice too, but Rio was really something different.
Really?
You have the mountains in the background, and you're in the village. And that was nice.
Do you have now kind of? I'd like to actually, let's switch gears. When did you decide to write the book?
Yeah, I was at a point in my life. I was at a point in my life where I was at a crossroad, and I was frustrated with my crossroad. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I was trying to get into university leadership, and yet I'd done all this stuff in professional sport, and I was a really well-regarded researcher and an international societal leader. For sports psychology, I'm the president for the field worldwide, and I wanted to do something new, and I felt like I was being held back and passed over, and I was trying to, and I felt that was a gift that was being overlooked. And then the interesting thing about it was, no, I wasn't being overlooked at all.
Oh, really?
What happened was a complete reversal of fortune. I ended up writing a book only to recognize something that I knew in my when I was in first and second year university, is that I'm a damn good writer. And I ended up writing a mainstream motivational book that's doing extremely well. I had a podcast in the UK this morning, and it's selling well there, and it got picked up by Chapters Indigo. So it's in all the stores nationally. And if I wouldn't have had the existential crisis, I would have never written that book. And if I would have never written that book, I wouldn't have had the bounty of what came afterwards.
Oh, that makes sense.
Isn't that cool? Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it was the frustration, and it was we were in COVID, and the university was in financial crisis, and all of these things. And I was at my last Olympics. I couldn't do anymore. 25 years of Olympic Games and 8 Olympics. I was gived out from amateur sport and sitting in villages and sleeping on cots and having food at large mess halls, and traveling twice a week sometimes to different places. And this was a way of changing gears, and it just opened up a whole new world of podcasting and speaking with people like you, and writing to people, and like last week I was gifted with having 5 CBC interviews, radio interviews in the same day.
That's right, last Friday.
Yeah, it was, and it was about the Olympics, and like none of that would have happened if I didn't feel that I needed to make a move. But I got that glimpse. I put a pen to paper, and I finished the book in Tokyo while I was at the Olympics in Tokyo, and shortly thereafter signed with a publisher, refined it, and now it's reality.
Amazing. Do you have kind of an explanation? So for this, whenever between reading in the book, between talking to friends of mine about this upcoming episode with you, and then also from my own experience, competing in a bunch of different places, a bunch of different sports.
Yeah, you're a martial artist.
Yeah, so I compete competitively in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So I grapple a lot. Not so much like competition this year, just work stuff kind of deterred it a bit, unfortunately, but a lot last year, and then it'll probably be more in the future. But what I've noticed too from in the past, even like racing, track and field, swimming, basketball, soccer, hockey, you name it, there's always this thing that myself and others experience, which is the anxiety before. Like right when you arrive at the venue or the day of or even leading up, there's that anxiety of the performance, right? Is there an explanation for that you have?
Yeah.
And
sure.
then we can kind of dive into it a bit more in terms of like, not
Sure.
solutions, but best way to
Yeah,
kind of
and the question
manage.
then becomes, is it anxiety or is it stress?
Right.
And not all stress is anxiety, right?
No.
There's positive stress and there's negative stress. And positive stress pushes us to the next level and encourages us to bring our best foot forward, whereas negative stress compels us to cope and try to hang on to things that when we don't feel we have enough resources. And the healthy thing is the positive stress, and the only way to get to that point in your own mind is to focus on process and not outcome, because you can't control an outcome, but you can control the process for the most part. There's always an unforeseen circumstance. At the Olympics, the gymnast where the hand grip broke, and he was having a Canadian gymnast, a fantastic performance, and the whole thing fell apart, and then he had to remount and start the performance all over again. That's an unforeseen circumstance, but all he could do in that moment was focus on the process. And I think what happened there was a little bit of a focus on the outcome, and then he lost the quality that he was originally laying down in the performance routine.
Interesting.
Yeah. You got to work the process. If you're on a hockey team and you're behind, you don't look at the score, you look at the next play and you take it play by play, second by second, and then slowly but surely you're going to claw your way back into a game and break the opponent. Look at the Stanley Cup Finals this year with Edmonton. What was it? 3-0, 3-1, 3-2, 3-3, and then Florida came back and
squashed them.
And well, I wouldn't say they squashed them. I think the process was what Florida did, and I think the outcome was what Edmonton did at that moment. Before that, it was the reversal. It was Edmonton focusing on the process, and Florida tasting the win and wanting to close, and so they were focused on the outcome, and then they eventually were forced into, okay, we got to regroup.
Yeah.
I would guess that that's what happened in there, and then they became process-oriented, and Edmonton became outcome-oriented, and they did not.
Because they're like, we're gonna do it. We came back. If we can win one more, and they
instead of just playing.
Yeah.
Instead of just playing. And I'm sure they played extremely well.
Oh yeah.
But process orientation, there's degrees of it, and you got to push the boundaries of it all the time, and you got to stay true to it, and you can't deviate from it. You can't lapse from process.
So it's how do you shift that focus away from being results driven? Because it's why are we competing? We compete to win.
But the win is the consequence of the performance,
right? It's
not the opposite.
Yeah.
Not the opposite.
Right.
You can have a performance where you win and you still haven't laid. An NHL team could win a game and still not perform well, and they could win several games and not be trending poorly before they eventually go into a slump. Then they could be in that slump and performing really well and lose a couple games before they eventually turn things around.
Oh, okay, I get it.
But you got to be you got to be true to the process.
Interesting.
You got to work the process.
It feels very challenging because the outcome, like the goal being the result, right, is very, very.
Well, you look at the high school kids who are going off and doing exams, and they're thinking about the score instead of writing the exam. Their head is on the score and the final grade and completing the course and going on. I see that in university students all the time.
If I get an 83, I'll get an A in this class.
Yeah. Instead of saying, okay, I'm going to do the process, and then what happens is a 96.
Yeah.
Or 98.
Yeah, true.
But the 98 came from them really thinking, okay, what do I need to do to really understand the material?
Yeah.
So when I go and teach kids in university, I say, okay, forget about the grade. You're all going to do well in the grade.
Yeah.
I said, don't worry about that. Let's talk about the content. Let's sit down around the table in a circle, talk about the content, deal with your questions, and let's drill down.
Yeah.
Let's make this course about that. And then all of a sudden, people have to recalibrate, and it takes. I have a story about that in the latter part of the book, where it takes them 3 or 4 classes before they say, okay, this is not just another course, and it's not just another passing grade.
Pass-fail type.
It's now about what I could learn and what's going to stick with me after this course. Like, why are we learning if not, are we learning to pass the grade, or are we learning to learn?
Because if it is just pass the grade, then it is result driven. Okay,
the hockey player, are they practicing to get into the draft, or are they practicing to really develop their skills, and as a consequence, they go through the draft and go high? go early in the
Oh,
go
that
early
makes
in the
sense.
draft.
Yeah.
But they're not really. That's where you have to be about the process. And when I was as a competitor about the process, I didn't worry about the result. The results took care of themselves. And every athlete that I've had who's won world titles and multi-million-dollar fights on the night have always been about the process, the team, the experience, this moment.
Interesting. Is there any? I guess what I'm asking is your kind of approach to it. It is the 8 steps. Like that is the 8 steps you work with on each athlete. Because I was about to ask about a structure you use.
Well, there's much.
Here.
There's other things I do with
independent.
athletes, and we're working on a follow-up book right now.
Amazing.
Just working on a proposal now.
Come on, let's go.
Yeah,
That's
about
exciting.
lessons from research and practice based on 25 years of working with refugee athletes and athletes from the street. And that's a whole other book. But this is a self-help book for people who are stuck or people who feel like they're sort of not moving forward. They're bored. They want to explore another piece of their life. They've been putting in time. They're 25.
Right.
They've been 25 for too long, and what they settled on 25 is
that.
not working at 45.
Nope.
What they settled on in high school is not paying dividends. They're no longer a good hockey player.
Yeah.
You know, they're no longer competitive, and they're. What next? What else can I do? And this is to spur you out of the when you get stuck in the mud and you can't gain traction and your pickup truck is sinking. This is the thing to get you out of that mud.
And it's applicable with work, life, sport, all of it. It's more of a general.
Yeah, the examples are not just about sport.
No.
The examples in there were about universities. The examples were about, like I worked with KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, doing motivational work with the service industry, and a lot of those people didn't have high school educations.
Crazy.
And we were still doing motivational work. You know, the stories in there are not just about athletes or just about coaches, but they're about winning scenarios and pushing to the thin edge.
Jeez. That sounds, I'm very excited to finish it and actually.
If you finish it, you got to review it.
Yeah, I will.
You got to go on and review
it
on the website.
Do you want, like on the direct, like on your website?
No, on the publisher's website or on Indigo.
Okay, I'll do both.
Yeah,
I'll do both. Yeah, I'll do both for sure.
You'll get another coffee out of the deal.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go. Thank you. Oh, that's awesome. I'm so excited. So with that kind of being said, there's something else I wanted to ask. What is you have this book. I saw this thing done and I'm like introducing this with each guest before it kind of wrap up and you give like your red carpet speech. I want you to do 3 books, 2 people, and then 1 kind of lesson or quote that you think has stuck with you for all the time.
Okay.
Where that works.
Let's deal with them one by one.
Yeah.
3 books.
3 books. Like they could be impactful, ones that you've read, and one could be yours.
Yeah, one of my mentors, now deceased Terry Orlick, wrote a book called In Pursuit of Excellence. The first and second editions of that were just awesome. Yeah. And they landed up selling in English only 500,000 copies, but they landed up getting translated into Chinese and all these other countries. And it was a really cool driver for me. Really? The Tao of Mindfulness from Jerry Lynch was about Eastern philosophy and motivation, and that's what got me thinking about lots of motivational theories from around the world, and they're not all the same. Learned Optimism, New York Times bestselling author, postdoc, mentor, Martin Seligman, and that book was about resilience and how to be resilient. Those are 3 books. Yeah.
Oh man. All right. Well,
what's the next one?
Everybody's gonna start ordering those now, as well as this. So the next one is 2 people.
2
people. 2 people. They can be like mentor, family. They can be just people who've had an impact on you.
Yeah, 2 people. I would say one of them would have to be, believe it or not, my wife. And the reason why I said that is because when we married, I was in the midst of my doctorate and thinking about flunking. They thought I was going to flunk out because I really wasn't. I wasn't in the right headspace. They weren't understanding what I was doing. They thought I wasn't doctoral material and that I shouldn't be doing research. And I had to change faculties and get an ombuds person. And my wife said, "You stick with it. Don't call in the towel. You're going to regret it later." Yeah. And she was working full time, and I was studying full time. and she was 7 years younger than me at the time.
Yeah.
And she was, going out and giving tickets, municipality tickets, to cars on streets and stuff, so that we could earn a living.
Do you have one kind of wrap up like lesson or thing that we kind of talked about today, or a thing that you learned, or even quote, whatever it might be, to kind of round out what we discussed today before we promo this and before we sign off? Kind of like a little conclusion.
Chase down your present, consider next steps, plan ahead, and line up other possibilities so that you have a pathway and an exciting life.
Amazing.
Because you're gonna live your life anyway.
Right.
What you choose to do with it and wring out of it
Yeah.
is an entirely other question.
Yeah. Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. That's amazing. Yeah, it's simple, it's clean, it's
Yeah.
to the point. Yeah.
Yeah, and you take a look at the hockey players who are lost several years later, or boxers who can't retire and they become punch drunk because they don't leave the sport long enough. Why is that? Because they haven't mapped ahead. Academics who don't move on to the next stage of their life and they're teaching the same material from 20 years ago. There's so many different examples that you can have from people who are
Right.
stuck and they've outlived their usefulness in their current role,
Yeah.
and they haven't planned to the next role and something new and exciting in their life that keeps them sharp.
Right. They don't dive into that.
Yeah, so they're not sharp, and then their mind atrophies. It sort of shrinks, and life isn't an exciting thing anymore. It's now just putting in time. I don't believe in putting in time. I don't believe in going through the motions. I don't believe in any of those things. I believe that when you're there, you're there.
Yeah.
And you have to be in this moment, and you have to think about the next moment. You've got to start carving out game plans. Those sorts of things cross your point of reference. Every day, glimpses are things that hey, I should be chasing that down. You mark it down on a piece of paper and
Yeah.
put it on hold maybe, or start putting together the resources so you can chase it down in 6 months. But don't just usher it off as a fleeting idea, only to lose an opportunity that could have been, where you would have been great at something entirely new.
Okay. Interesting. I'm really grateful that you were able to make time today, carve out space in your schedule to have me here, especially at your really nice house, and make me some coffee. I'm very, very excited.
Anytime.
So I really
we could do it
appreciate
again. We can absolutely do it again in the future.
Amazing.
So
That's awesome.
the door's open.
Amazing. Thank you very much. Do you have, where can people find the book? Where can
Yeah.
people find you, connect with you and stuff? Where can they work with you, stuff like that? Hear
It's
more
being
about
sold out of Chapters Indigo. It's at the store. My Instagram is @RobJSchinke. And so that's easy enough to do, and I think you're connected with
Yes,
me,
sir.
so you could put it up.
It's all LinkedIn, it'll be
the
up.
book's publisher website is Human Kinetics Publishers, and I'm at Laurentian University and in Sudbury when I'm not traveling.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right on, Robert. I really appreciate it. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
sir. Right on.